What is going on, everybody? My layout's a little messed up. It'll be fixed once my amazing guest gets in here in a couple minutes. But hello, welcome to AJ's Analysis. It is your host, AJ Sobalski. We have a lot to talk about today. Obviously, a disappointing kind of a dud loss for the Bills on Saturday against the Steelers. I am joined today by Locked On Bills one and only Joe Marino. He does a great job. One of the best podcasts around in the Buffalo area. It's a must listen. You can find him over on YouTube and at Twitter at the Joe Marino on Twitter. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we get started, just a quick word from Jay Spence, an IPA that Buffalo Rumblings is partnering with.
Bills Mafia is back. Are you ready for it? The third annual Buffalo Rumblings IPA beer release party is going down September 16th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Resurgence Brewing Company located downtown at 55 Chicago Street. I'm going to tell you what, you do not want to miss this event. Come out and hang with Joe, Sarah, and the rest of the Buffalo Rumblings crew for the Megapod. You're going to want to bring your questions and be a part of the live stream. Get involved. It's going to be live. And this year, we're also going to have our friends from Fans of Buffalo joining the party and sponsoring the fun. They're going to be in the house to provide you with all the information you need to make your away game day experience the easiest and the most smooth that you've ever had in your life. I can promise you, they do their job very well. So make sure you make it out Saturday, September 16th, 6 p.m., Resurgence Brewing Company, 55 Chicago Street. Go Bills.
And here he is, Joe Marino. For those of you listening on audio, thank you. I appreciate all the listens after the show. It's greatly appreciated. 17 of you in here. Please drop some comments, some questions. We'll try to get to those throughout the show. Joe, how are you doing today?
AJ, I'm doing good, man. Glad we can hook up and have a conversation together. I know that we've tried a couple of times. Availability was a little off for me, but here we are, and we get to talk Bills football.
Absolutely. That's the goal. Sarah, how are you doing today? Let's get started here. Obviously, I want to start with your thoughts on the game, just overall, maybe some takeaways. We can get into specifics once we get there, but just your overall thoughts about the game and what you think the Bills accomplished, what they didn't accomplish, I know it's just a preseason game, and that's kind of been the narrative from some people, but maybe just some of your thoughts and takeaways from the game.
Well, there's certainly a lot to get into. I think the prevailing thought is probably disappointment with the penalties, right? 12 in the first half. That's a crazy amount. And they had some issues the week before, right? And to hear Sean McDermott say that they took necessary steps that he thought were necessary to eliminate them and pulling guys out of drills during practice when they committed a penalty, for them to turn that into 12 in the first half is pretty disappointing. And you certainly hope that doesn't really linger into the regular season. That certainly stands out to me. I think there was some good moments for the Bills offense, the first team offense. I think Josh Allen made some really exciting throws down the field, especially to Gabe Davis. You saw Dalton Kincaid really get involved and be exactly what you hope he's going to be, that middle of the field target, the route runner, the smooth receiving ability. You saw that on display. Osiris Torrance continued to look good at right guard. Obviously, Josh was pressured quite a bit. I charted in the 12 dropbacks, including the penalties, right? I didn't dismiss them because those are things that happen. 12 dropbacks, pressured on 6 of them. That's not a world you want to live in. That's concerning. I think the pass rush was very disappointing for me on defense. Linebacker play was, I don't know. I don't think these guys, Klein, Dotson, they don't really inspire me much. I was disappointed with Kyer Elam. He's not really, I know everybody wants him to be the starter, but he's not putting the tape out there that says, hey, I'm better than Dane Jackson. So I think from a high level, I know we're going to get into some specifics. Those are some of my big takeaways as I reflect quickly on the game that we watched on Saturday night.
Yeah, the penalties are definitely a concern. I think they can get cleaned up, and I think some of the calls you may question. I think the Spencer Brown block in the back, I don't know if you can call it. Maybe it was that. I think it was a little nitpicky. There was only, I think the Steelers only had 2 penalties in the first half compared to the Bills 12. But yeah, let's start with the playmaking from Dalton Kincaid and the playmaking from Gabe Davis. 2 guys that I believe are set to kind of take off this year in terms of if they can stay healthy. Dalton Kincaid in a role where he's used as the, in 11 and a half or whatever, 12 personnel, whatever you want to call it, because I think he'll be a lot aligned in the slot quite a bit. I think his ability to run those option routes over the middle is just going to be like a deadly thing to get him on linebackers. You saw that a lot against the Steelers. And then obviously on the outside in the slot with Gabe Davis, who I think they can move around and utilize more as well. Something that Ken Dorsey, you've seen from a training camp a few times, Gabe Davis lining up all over the place. Obviously, most of the time in the boundary, but there has been that a little gimmicky, play calling from Ken Dorsey himself during training camp. Just those two players, how important are they for you? And what did you see from them on Saturday that maybe you can give them an arrow whopper? Their stock's kind of trending up headed into the season.
Yeah, those guys are key pieces of the offense. I think Stephon Diggs is in line to get 150 targets, but then I think you can look at Davis and Kincaid and think to yourself, that's probably the number 2 and number 3 guy in terms of volume of targets for this offense. It could be 175 plus combined for those two players. And so they're critical pieces of this offense. And I like what I saw from both of them. Gabe, obviously, a couple of nice catches. One that was negated, that 40-yard hole shot by Josh Allen was taken away by the Spencer Brown holding. I mean, that was a tremendous display of ball skills, hands, sideline awareness, body control, crazy good throw from Josh Allen. And I thought all of his completions to Gabe Davis were really, really strong and down the field. And I think Gabe's just had a great training camp. I know you've seen a lot of it. I've seen a lot of it too. And I just feel like that chemistry is really taking off. And I feel good about him being able to solidify his role, due in large to the arrival of Dalton Kincaid, who I think is going to be a major benefit for Gabe Davis. Gabe, for what he offers as a down the field target size, ball skills, he's not necessarily that quick separator. And so the presence of a slot player like Dalton Kincaid that can get open quick, that can draw attention to the middle of the field, I think it's going to help Gabe Davis out and allow him to be a more efficient weapon in terms of the times that Josh Allen targets him with the football. And so Gabe was really good, and I thought Dalton Kincaid as well. He had 4 targets. He probably should have caught all 4 of them. The one that was incomplete was kind of a skipper right to him, right? But he was great separation and a great route. And I think that route running prowess that he shows already, right? That's what gets me excited. He's athletic. He can run great routes. He's smooth. He's got really, really strong hands, and nothing looks too big for him at this point. And you think about rookies, and we've watched a lot of preseason, or you should. I don't know if I have watched a lot of preseason. I've watched a lot of rookies look like they're drinking from a fire hose. You don't get that impression with Dalton Kincaid whatsoever. And, I think you always want to have the right expectations for a guy and not hype him up too much and just be mindful of that the guy's never taken a snap in an NFL regular season game. But every indicator that you're looking for that says he's going to be a very meaningful weapon for the Bills this year and potentially like a superstar for this team, it's all there. And I'm buying in fully based on the player I watched at Utah, the player that I watched at training camp, and the player that I watched against the Steelers.
Yeah, the Gabe Davis kind of hole shot from Josh Allen, it wasn't the same route as those Indianapolis Colts routes his rookie year where he went off and had those sideline grabs with that, great sideline awareness, getting 2 feet down. But that play almost brought me back to that rookie year of Gabe Davis. Be like, dude, this guy, if he can do that consistently, getting to the sideline, getting open on the sideline, using his, his frame and his hands to high point the ball, and get his feet down. I mean, that's something that, if you can do that consistently, it's a great benefit to this offense. Joe, totally agree with the Kincaid. Every time he's on the field, even in training camp, I'm like, how did this guy fall to 25? I just boggles my mind. I thought, throughout the whole kind of pre-draft process, I thought he was going to be a top 20, top 15 pick. I thought just the wide receiver skill from him has just been there since, day one. No moment has been too big for him. He's looked good. He had that one drop during the red and blue or the blue and red scrimmage, whatever you want to call it. But that was the only kind of hiccup. And that hasn't been a consistent thing like, a Khalil Shakir that we might get to later. But let's move to the Andy Isabella, Justin Shorter kind of dilemma. I saw your tweet, and, Andy Isabella had 1 rep as a gunner, kind of used his first step, put his foot in the ground, and just, ran all the way down the field and caused the fair catch to happen. Is that something that you believe maybe could get a nod in the battle right there between Shorter or Isabella? Or do you think no matter what, regardless, really, with Shorter's good game with that touchdown over the middle, at the end of the 4th quarter, is that kind of Shorter's job and maybe Isabella can squeak on? I know that's kind of the conversation. I don't think Isabella gets a spot, but there's some that do. So what are your just thoughts on Shorter versus the Isabella thing?
Can probably talk myself into either one making the roster. I probably lean Justin Shorter predictively. I mean, he is the draft pick. He's the guy that's cost controlled on a 5th-round rookie deal for the next 4 seasons. That does offer something different in terms of height, weight, speed. He's got good hands. I don't think he's a great route runner, but he's got good hands, good physicality, good ball skills. And he translates well to not only a blocking role in addition to what he can offer as a receiver, but he is that 4th down guy where whatever phase of special teams you're looking for, he can do it, right? And he's not going to be a returner, but you want him to cover kicks and punts. You want him to block on punt and kick return. He can certainly do that. And I think that's going to provide a lot of value to the Bills as this wide receiver 6, right? I mean, think about Jake Kumaro, that type of player. I think he can fill that role. Now, what's interesting about Andy Isabella is I think he's just a more dynamic route runner. I think he's got plenty of inconsistency with his hands if you watch him at UMass and throughout his NFL career, but him getting some opportunities to show more, whether that's serving as the gunner or serving as a kick and punt returner and showing the full breadth of what he can offer a football team, is positioning him well to at least make this a conversation. But at the end of the day, it's just a 1-year contract, right? It's not that cost control player. And I think that could give Shorter the upper hand predictively. I think they're both roster worthy, but I don't know that the Bills are going to keep all 6, because I think the Bills they're not going to keep both, because I think they're going to keep 6. Your top 5 are Diggs, Davis, Hardy, Sherfield, Shakir, probably, and then you have spot for one more. I think it leans towards Shorter, but Isabella is certainly making this a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on that. I think, and you say Khalil Shakir, and I noticed how you kind of phrased that, but probably. Is Khalil Shakir in your mind a guy that you had big aspirations for? I think he had every opportunity to be the wide receiver 3. I still think maybe he has an outside shot. I don't think Sherfield and Hardy, yes, they've been consistent. I think Hardy's shown some things. They've used him a lot in pre-snap motion, stuff like that. Yeah. But is there a path for Shakir to not make this roster right now, or do you think that's kind of just way too far-fetched?
I'd be surprised. I think it's a conversation worth having because Shakir reels you in, and then, man, he disappoints you sometimes, right? I mean, you see he's a good route runner. He makes some really good catches, can play inside and outside, but then there are just times where you just see him misplay a football or drop an easy one or whiff on a block, right? There's enough warts there for you to say, well, I mean, is this guy really a lock? I think he's going to be a lock. I mean, McDermott said openly recently that he has a lot of confidence in him, and I think that means something. He was also on the field a ton last year, right? 30-something% of the snaps. He didn't get a ton of targets, but he was out there. And I think as a cost control rookie 5th-round pick, a lot of what I said with Justin Shorter, a guy that does offer some upside in the return game as well, you know, I think that there's enough there that is going to make him stick, but the inconsistency is disappointing. And that showed up at Boise State too, where if you watched him there, you saw all the things that really in, but there just are those moments you're like, man, like how, like why? And it's frustrating. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think there's a large enough sample size of inconsistency that you know that that's part of the deal with him. And I know that he's wired the right way, comes from a military family, like all the stuff, you know, that the Bills really, really like about a player, but there's inconsistency there. I think he makes it, but I think it's, like I said, it's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I think he makes this roster, and I think he's also, though, I think he's put himself deeper on the depth chart than most probably originally thought headed into the season. I really do think some people believe that he was that wide receiver 3. You saw some flashes last year. Obviously, the play that comes to mind, not a good play, but it was the Miami Dolphins drop where he, that probably could have turned the game around. That's kind of where, he reels you in, and then, oh my gosh, what the heck happened? So there are those moments with Shakir. It's happened during training camp. It's happened, in the preseason. So it's kind of been a consistent thing. So yeah, you're spot on with that, and I think you're going the right way. But we're going to move to the offensive line, something that obviously, you got a new left guard. I think Osiris Torrance, McDermott, yesterday during the walkthrough said it's still up for grabs, but I think Osiris Torrance, based on what I saw on Saturday, went back and watched his reps. I mean, his anchor, his ability to maul people. I really like what I've seen from him. He's also shown ability out in space a little bit more than I thought. In college, he was kind of that stereotypical, like, stay in the pocket and block with your anchor and not really move and get in space. He's shown that through a couple of games that, getting leaner into camp, not as big as he was in college. He's shown the ability to kind of get out in space more and be that reliable right guard for them. So, Joe, your thoughts on the offensive line? What is it with Spencer Brown? Do you believe Ryan Bates is set to be that backup center just in case Mitch Morse, goes down with an injury? And what do you feel about Torrance? And then obviously Dawkins has been talked about a little bit. He's a pro's pro. I think he'll be fine. But just your thoughts. You can go through each one if you'd like, but just your overall thoughts on the O-line.
Yeah, I think Dawkins will be fine. He's been a pro for a while. I can't get myself to a level of being concerned with Deion Dawkins. I don't know where the haters have come from recently on Dawkins. it's really wild. I don't know. I can't explain that. They can explain it, I guess. I don't really align with the opinions that are being sent to me on Dawkins. I think he's a perfectly like above average left tackle in the NFL. I don't think he's an elite left tackle. He's not Trent Williams or anything like that, but is he an above average one? Yeah, I do think he is. Connor McGovern at left guard. The pass pro looks good. I think the style of run game that the Bills like to run, a lot of like spread power stuff, and like it's gonna translate better for Connor as opposed to what he was asked to do with Kellen Moore in that offense in Dallas. A lot of like needing to create displacement, not a lot of angles that create advantageous opportunities for him. Like I think it will in Buffalo. I think he'll be a reasonable starter. Morse is Morse at center, outstanding pass blocker, ton of range in the run game. He's not a people mover, but he's smart. He's got good rapport with Josh Allen. I feel very good about him. Right guard, Osiris Torrance, I think he's looked really steady. I think he's been smooth, controlled, and powerful. Those are the three words that stay on my mind when I've watched his snaps throughout the preseason. It was a little bit tough to gauge him at camp. I mean, you get one look live from the sideline, right? It's hard to really get good takeaways for the interior offensive line, but having a chance to watch the tape for both the Colts and Steelers game, I feel like he's ready to go as a starter there. And I mean, the fact that he got the opportunity against the Colts to start and play as much as he did, and then with Josh Allen at quarterback, right, to start, right, I think that says something. And I know that McDermott hasn't said it out loud, but it feels like it's his job. So I'm very excited about him as being an upside player for this offensive line and being that people mover, right? There's not been a lot of guys that just create a ton of displacement for this Bills offensive line. I think Torrance can give him that. And then that gets us to Spencer Brown at right tackle, where, I think he's had a tough couple years to start his NFL career. And, there's certainly a lot of reasons for the up and down, whether it's coming out of high school as a tight end for 8-man football and then not playing his senior year because it's canceled due to COVID, and the rookie starter by week 4 and has some injuries. Entire second off season, he's got a back surgery that really kept him out right up until the Rams game, and then had his ups and downs as well in his second season. And so I've been hopeful that he could capitalize on a really exciting physical package in terms of size and athleticism and length. But every time I watch Spencer Brown, he just looks vulnerable to me. And so I think I'm becoming a little bit discouraged there, where I'm hopeful, and I don't think the book's not written on Spencer Brown, but you watch him against Pittsburgh, and I really only credited him with allowing pressure once. It was the on the hole shot to Gabe Davis, right? His face got crossed, his inside hand didn't latch, and Marcus Golden was able to get that inside rush on him. But he's just vulnerable, and I think that I was hopeful that wouldn't be the case, seeing him fully healthy against the Steelers. So it is a level of concern that I have for this offense is that right tackle spot. But he's got upside, but at some point he's got to deliver on that upside, and it needs to be this year, and it needs to be quick.
Yeah, I went back and watched Spencer Brown's reps against Pittsburgh. I didn't think – I mean, here's the thing, and we were talking about it kind of before the show, and people have these predetermined thoughts and predetermined notions about a player. And there's a lot of people and naysayers on Spencer Brown. I think that – and rightfully so, he hasn't really proven much. He had an okay rookie year with some promise, and then last year, that kind of got shut down. But for me, he didn't look too bad. I thought he held up well. Not great against TJ Watt. I mean, he's a premier pass rusher. One play that was really notable to me was when he passed off the defensive end to Torrance and picked up the linebacker on the blitz. I thought that was a really good play from Spencer. Just from a communication standpoint, because I'm not really worried. Obviously, I'm more worried about Spencer Brown than anyone else on the offensive line, just because he's the only one that hasn't done it in the NFL. Obviously, Torrance I'm concerned about, but he allowed 0 sacks in college. I think the more reps he gets, the better he'll get. But I'm more worried about communication, pre-snap communication with these guys. I think that's going to be the key. I think teams are going to try to dial up pressure. It's going to be important for the two guys on the right or left of Morris. They're going to be two new guys most likely. So that communication, Aaron Kromer preaches it, continuity. I think that's a big reason why Spencer Brown is still at that right tackle spot. They wanted to keep that unit cohesive, knowing they're probably going to replace those two interior spots. So that's my thoughts on it. I want to see better pre-snap communication. I want to get rid of the false start penalties that they can't happen. I mean, it wasn't just Spencer Brown. It was the whole offensive line. But now, Joe, we get to the conversation of the depth, and that's another question. Obviously, it took a hit with Tommy Doyle. Prayers up to Tommy, a guy that he probably would have made this roster with the Brandon Shell retirement. I think he brings that, versatile presence on the offensive line. But he's done now. He's going to have probably a year to 16-month recovery with the ACL, LCL tear and like a nerve issue around the knee. So, scary injury and something that obviously you don't want to see. So, Joe, with the retirement of Brandon Shell, you have your guy RVD that, he's looked okay. I think he's looked, at the left tackle spot backing up Dion. I think that's where he's been best. I think that's something you've mentioned. And on the other side of the ball, or on the other side of the offensive line, David Quessenberry, is that a guy that maybe can play that depth role? I know there's a rumor maybe that, the Cardinals offensive tackle Josh Jones is someone that maybe could not be on a roster and maybe be a trade candidate. Do the Bills bring in someone for depth? First question. And the second question, are you confident with the depth they have right now?
Well, so the interior offensive line depth is outstanding. It might be the best interior offensive line depth in the entire NFL with Ryan Bates and David Edwards. I mean, those guys are outstanding. Brian Bates can play all the spots, including center. And then David Edwards is an NFL starter. The Bills just happen to be very lucky to have him on their bench. And so I love that. I mean, that's really, really good. Not the same situation at tackle, right? And I love what I've seen from Ryan Vandemark at left tackle. Long, athletic, controlled, coordinated, using his length extremely well. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in him to play on the left side. I don't have as much for him to play on the right side. And he's a 4-year starter at UConn, and the last 3 he was at left tackle. And so you can just tell it's not as natural. He's not as repped on the right side. And so, that's a level of concern, but it's nice to know that I feel somewhat comfortable with him stepping in for Deion Dawkins if necessary at left tackle. At right tackle, it's a mess. I mean, David Quessenberry, dude, like he struggles. He struggled last year when he was on the field. And then, I was at camp for 4 days and I'm like charting sacks and like everybody's beating David Quessenberry. And like, even in this preseason, he's been getting worked a little bit. And what's fascinating is, like, was he even going to play in this last game? Like, was Tommy Doyle and Ryan Vandemark going to finish the game at tackle? And like, because of the injury, it led to a few reps from Quessenberry, and then Garage comes in at right tackle. Like, I have a hard time gauging what this team actually thinks about Quessenberry because he was like a 4-hole spot for them last year, but he struggled. And then it feels like just guys are climbing over him this year. And so I don't know, like, I don't love being a snap away from that guy going in. Brandon Shell gave me a higher level of comfort. And, I think maybe they were hopeful that Tommy Doyle could beat him out. And, Tommy Doyle's not going to be around for a while. So I think the Bills do have a concern with their tackle depth. I think right now it's probably Vandemark and Quessenberry that make the team. But I think they should be considering outside options. And that's because there are good outside options, whether it's Jason Peters that you can contact, or even like, Josh Jones is a guy who I thought played good football last year and, has shown some versatility himself. And it's hard to add a guy right now and then like expect them to be an answer for you. But I think you need to start having some hedges, and God forbid one of these guys gets injured at tackle and you really have to find out what your depth looks like. It could get a little dicey.
And Joe, especially when you're dealing with a guy on the right side, 6'7", back issues like that, that is just concerning to me in itself because of the fact that I think that's something that could, reoccur or something that may plague him for, his NFL career. Jessica has a question for you, Joe. Do you think Richard Garage will start training next to his college teammate at right tackle?
He started, right? That's transition has already happened. He played right tackle in this game that we just watched. I think Richard Garage is an interesting player. I mean, I watched him at Florida. I thought he was pretty solid. I thought he was really good at the Senior Bowl. His testing was terrible. I mean, like very, very poor. I'm surprised he can function in the NFL with how bad his athletic testing was. But then, like, he's not that bad when he's on the field. So, I mean, I think as a developmental guy that'll be stashed in the practice squad, he does give me a level of appeal. But I don't think there's a world where he can help the Bills this year as a reserve.
All right, one more thing on the offensive side of the ball. We'll transition to the Stephon Diggs stuff for about 2 minutes, and then we're going to get to the defensive stuff. Backup quarterback, Joe. I think the Matt Barkley kind of fiasco or the fun with him is kind of coming to an end. I don't look. He's a good friend with Josh. They know each other well. He can do it if he's absolutely asked to. Again, you're not trusting a backup quarterback across the whole entire league to do much of anything and win this league. There's just not that. There's barely 20 starters in the NFL that are good enough to win 9 to 10 games. There's not 64 quarterbacks that can do it week in, week out. Just your thoughts on the backup quarterback position, Kyle Allen, Matt Barkley. I know it's probably not the biggest concern for you just because I think Josh Allen, like collective fan base, if you don't have Josh, you're not winning. But just your thoughts on Kyle Allen's performance on Saturday as well as Matt Barkley's.
Well, I mean, I can certainly understand that perspective of, all right, Josh Allen's not in there. It's going to be tough. It really is. But the NFL is using quarterback depth. There was a record last year for the most amount of quarterbacks to start a game in the NFL. It was like 66, which is more than 2 per team, right, on average. So, and Josh Allen currently has the longest streak in the NFL for consecutive games by a starting NFL quarterback, and he's got it by a large margin. And so, I mean, I'm not calling it or anything like that, but he's had good injury luck, and at the same time, the NFL is using more starting quarterbacks than ever. So it's kind of a funny spot to be. And so I don't think that you have to realize, like, not every injury is season ending, right? If Josh Allen goes down for the season, okay, then we can have a big cry fest. But there's a chance it could be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then you still get a chance to get him back and go on a run. And so I don't like the idea that you're one play away from the other 52 guys on the roster not having a chance to compete. So I do think you need to have a reasonable option to step in there. And I thought Kyle Allen could be that. And what the whole Matt Barkley thing really came down to Kyle Allen not looking good, right? That's what inspired it. Then Matt Barkley goes out there and has a crazy good game against the Colts. And, now it's like, okay, Matt Barkley, can he be the guy? We know what Matt Barkley is. Matt Barkley's played football in the NFL for a long time. And sometimes he can have those electric moments, whether it was against the Colts or that one Jets game where he lost his mind and played really, really good during Josh Allen's rookie season. But more times than not, he's a little bit more like what we saw against the Steelers. But you started to ask yourself, is this the best option that they have? And the answer might be yes. Now, Kyle Allen went out there and played a lot better this past week. And I think one thing that we have to keep in mind with Kyle Allen is that everything's new for him, right? It's a new team, new weapons, new offensive line, new coordinator. And I think it's probably a really hard job as a backup quarterback to get up to speed given those circumstances. It's not like you're the guy, right? You're not getting out the starter reps. The focus is on Josh Allen and getting him ready to play in a season. And then for the backup quarterback, right, you got to figure it out kind of along the way as well. And so I'm hopeful that, we can look at the concerns that have existed with Kyle Allen and say, yeah, he just knew he needed reps, and we've seen growth, right? Week over week, we saw growth from Kyle Allen. I'm sure he's going to play a ton against the Bears on Saturday, and I think ultimately that's going to be your QB too. And so I don't expect a move to be made at quarterback. I don't know how significant the Matt Barkley injury is. I've heard some things there. If there is some significance there, then I'm sure the Bills will get a practice squad quarterback. But if not, I think it's Kyle Allen to the 53, Matt Barkley to the practice squad, and you sit there and hope and pray Josh Allen doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, and to your point, Joe, about stepping in if Josh gets hurt, I think it also is a little bit of luck. Like if Josh Allen misses 3 weeks during a Raiders, Commanders, Dolphins stretch, is different than him missing 3 games against the Eagles, Chiefs, and Cowboys. Like there's also like it's kind of like a luck. Like if he does go down, maybe you get a easier stretch or a weaker schedule. But yeah, thank you for listening, guys. Please leave a like, subscribe. We got a couple more things to talk about, the defensive side of the ball. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the Stefon Diggs kind of saga finally, hopefully coming to an end. Maybe until next year if the Bills fall short and don't make it past the divisional round. But that's conversation way down the line. But Stefon Diggs obviously comes out, responds to Stephen A. Smith, says he wants to be a Bill. He's, I ride with the mafia, all this stuff. Joe, do you think there's any, truth to what Stephen A. Smith said? Because there's part of me that maybe Stefon Diggs did get emotional and he did tell people some things, but we truly don't know. What are your thoughts on the Diggs thing, and how do you kind of feel about that? I know it's kind of been so prolonged that it's kind of old to talk about.
Well, I mean, Stephen A. Smith had to bring it up today, and so we have to have this conversation. I like what Stefon Diggs did today to kind of squash that right away. But I think my perspective on Diggs has always been this. We think everything's good right now, and it is. Mm-hmm. But what happens, not necessarily when the Bills next, like when they face adversity next, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how does Stefon Diggs respond in that moment? And is it different this time around based on what his utilization looks like? Like, what are the contributing factors? We really still don't know. And so did conversations fix it? But like, what happens when whatever he thought needed to be fixed rears its ugly head again, and does he lose his mind? So I think I'm always going to be a little bit nervous about Diggs until that next moment happens and how he responds. And look, receivers, they're different kind of people, man. It's hard for me to relate with them. I would certainly handle my business a lot differently than he has. He certainly wanted to make sure the whole world knew that he was frustrated about something, didn't want to tell us exactly what it was, but he wanted to make sure we knew he was mad. Congratulations, you did that. But yeah, I think I'll have a piece of me that's a little nervous until something doesn't go right and Diggs has the opportunity to lose his mind and he doesn't.
Yeah, that's that is like not I mean, it's kind of music to my ears because that's kind of exactly like how I feel. I think there's like trust and like, okay, we're living in the moment here. Like he had those conversations, they kind of figured themselves out. He's back on the team, laughing, having fun. But the big question is what happens, like you said, Joe, when there's that, that loss that you didn't expect, or they go through adversity, or someone goes down, or the emotions are high. Like, I don't know how he, I don't know the guy personally. I don't know how he is emotionally, but there is some concern for emotionally if he's able to handle, the whole 17-game season, playoffs, with going through all this stuff. How's he going to handle that? I think that's a great question and a great observation, Joe. And you're right about that. I think it's put to bed right now. But until I see the Bills go through something like that again, or go through adversity, and it doesn't need to be a 27-10 loss to the Bengals at home. It doesn't have to be an exact example. But even in midseason, if they drop a tough one or lose a game they've shown it, or something like a Minnesota game or something like that, like I just think there's some cause for concern. And I'm 90% probably there, but there's still 10% of me that's like, this could still be an issue down the road. Okay, we're moving to the defense now. So we've been talking exclusively offense. We covered the Diggs thing for a little bit. That's kind of I really don't want to address that until I'm going to have to again. Hopefully no one has to, but we'll see. But defensive side of the ball, cornerback 2. Dane Jackson, I mean, Mr. Reliable, Mr. Higher floor, lower ceiling. That's kind of what the narrative's been about him. Seems to be in the right spot majority of the time. Does get picked on a little bit, but that's expected, I think, when you have your opposite Trey White and you have two safeties that are the caliber of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Just that battle, how it's playing itself out. I know Christian Benford, towards the end of camp, when it was open to the public, flashed, had a couple of interceptions. I know Kyer Elam had a couple of moments where he shined, but then there's also been those moments, like on Saturday, where he didn't really have that great of a game. He got beat on a couple of releases. He was playing his press man, something that he really has flourished with, and was still getting beat. And then obviously Dane Jackson, another, I would say you can't really take much from the preseason game. He didn't get many reps. But just your thoughts on the cornerback 2 battle and how it's progressed after your thoughts on Saturday.
Well, I think Dane played like 7 snaps against the Steelers and like 6 maybe the week before that. And meanwhile, Benford and Elam are playing a ton. And I think that's the coaching staff saying, okay, you want the job? Go take it. Go get it. Because right now we think Dane Jackson's the best corner. And if one of y'all think you're better, then go do it, right? And they're getting that opportunity. And I don't think that they're doing much with the opportunity, AJ. I feel like based on what I've observed, I think the best corner has been Dane Jackson. I think the second best corner has been Christian Benford. And I think the third best corner has been Kyer Elam. And I know that probably makes people frustrated. Kyer Elam's the first round pick. And you certainly want him to be an answer, right? And have a couple of first round corners and Trey White and Kyer Elam and shutting down everybody. Well, that hadn't been the case so far. And I think that at the end of the day, while you should want your first round pick to be a starter, you should want your best players to be on the field. And based on what I've observed, I don't think Kyer Elam's been the best of the group, and I think he's been the third best of the group. And maybe there's going to be some platoon, right? The Bills have literally platooned at that position 3 of the last 6 years. It's been a normal thing, including last year they platooned at CB2. And so I don't think it's unprecedented that they'll do it again. And some of the games and some of the matchups may lend itself more to a Kyer Elam being in there over a Dane Jackson. But I don't. If you're putting stock into these preseason games, he hadn't played well. And like you mentioned, there were some issues with his face getting crossed and giving up inside leverage when he didn't have help. On the Kingsley Jonathan, go back and watch the snap where Kingsley Jonathan got his sack. I mean, Kyer Elam got twisted up, and I mean, the guy was wide open in the middle of the field. If Kingsley doesn't get that sack, I mean, it's a touchdown, probably a 30-yard gain and an easy throw down the field. So he's got to play better, and he's 22. He's young. I mean, he's a year and a half younger than Dalton Kincaid. That's something I keep on bringing up. it might not be a year 2 thing for him. It might be a year 3 thing, but certainly the trajectory here is a bit concerning. And I understand why Dane Jackson's getting this opportunity, because right now I think he's their best option.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I've seen from Dane in training camp, what I've seen from him in the limited preseason action. I mean, he had an interception. I think that was more like right place, right time. But I think he still was in the right spot. I just think it was I think Siran Neal put a great, hands in the air, got Anthony Richardson uncomfortable, a rookie that is going to be playing with a little, he's going to be a little confused his first start, and he's kind of a raw prospect. So that tends to happen. But yeah, Kaiir Elam, I don't know if he's someone in the comments said, could Elam turn out to be Roy Collins? Could Elam turn out to be Bean's first round bust? I'm not going to go that far yet. I'm not going to say it's trending even that way, but I think there is a part of me where maybe Kaiir Elam isn't the guy that they wanted him to be. Maybe they couldn't find a plan for him. Now, the thing that is kind of benefiting Elam, I believe, is the fact that Dane Jackson's on a 1-year deal. I don't know if they bring him back again. So that could open the door again for next year for Kaiir Elam. A lot of people are Kaiir Elam fans. A lot of fans want him to be the guy. And I understand that, because they traded up for him, and he was kind of like their last first round grade, and they went and got him. And he just hasn't, although he's shown some moments, I'd say, in the NFL when he's played, it hasn't been consistent. And then, Joe, like you said, I think Benford's had a really good camp. I don't think he's gotten as much opportunity as Elam and Jackson with the ones, but I think when he's gotten the opportunity, he's shown some good things. So I like what I've seen from Benford. Moving on to the middle linebacker. Are you got anything more, Joe? You got anything to add?
When you were talking there, it made me think of a story, and I don't know if this is going to hit home with people, but I'll put it out there.
Okay.
In a previous line of work that I had, I don't know, like 15 years ago, I was an account manager for a company, and I took over this account, right? And the people came to me, the ownership came to me and said, "Hey, we need you to take over this account. We might not be able to keep it. They got some really difficult people to work with, but we think that you can be the person that steps in and saves it." Okay. So I go in there and I feel some level of pressure, right? Because I don't want to lose the account. They think that I can be the one that saves it. There's a difficult person that I have to deal with. And I remember trying so hard to do everything right to save the account, make that person happy, and all the things, that I couldn't stop making mistakes. I couldn't, right? I'm like, and I even had the difficult person calls me out. And I remember speaking to this lady on the phone and saying, "You know what? I'm trying so hard not to make mistakes that I can't stop making them." And I just was very vulnerable and honest with them. And I wonder if there's some of that with Kaiir Elam, because AJ, I know you've been to a lot of practices, and I don't know if you observe the same things I have, but he's on the field early. He's really, really like rigid and repped, and he's working really hard. There's no question that he's putting in the time, right? He's the guy that wanted the playbook on the plane, all that stuff. And I think what he's not doing, he's not allowing him to just be natural, right? Everything that he's doing feels calculated. He's thinking, he's not trusting his technique. He's not understanding where his leverage is. And I think he's trying so hard to get it that it's the worst possible thing, because he's not allowing himself to play loose and play free. And I feel like if those parallels make sense, what I'm trying to communicate here, where you're trying so hard to do something that you're not doing it correctly because you're just not being yourself and being what you're fully capable of being.
Yeah, Joe, and I totally agree with that. And I think to add to that point, I think all offseason I've seen him on a couple shows and how he's talked about, and he's exuded confidence. I think you see that confidence exuded in one-on-one reps when he wins a rep. He's very emphatic. Like you said, he's always working after practice with Zane Anderson every day. He's out there after practice, one of the first ones on the field. More early, later on, he would come out a little bit later, but like starting camp, he was very, very. I know, Roy, I got to slow down. I got to work on that. But yeah, I think that Elam is a very interesting kind of thought. What is he going to be? Is he going to be that guy that maybe can plug in for Dane if he's not able to, I don't know, reach that kind of ceiling? I know he doesn't have the highest ceiling, so it's hard. But we'll see where that goes. So I want to move on to the middle linebacker spot. Huge kind of question mark for the Bills. They didn't do anything to replace it. Tremaine Edmonds got his bag in Chicago, something that I don't really think the Bills could afford, and I didn't really want them to do. I don't think that spending $18 million on him was really necessary. So what are your thoughts on Edmonds, kind of the loss of that? And I know that's kind of what we're coming back to now, because it was kind of, they'll be fine. They got Trell Bernard. They got a bunch of guys, Balen Spector. Someone is going to flash enough where we won't have to ask this question. But here I am asking it. What are your thoughts on the middle linebacker?
Well, AJ, I've been concerned about it for a long time. I've never thought that the Bills had a starting caliber middle linebacker on their roster since Tremaine Edmonds has been gone. I've never been high on Terrell Bernard, never been high on Tyrell Dotson, never been high on Balen Spector, AJ Klein. Like, I don't think these are NFL starters. And I think some of them are perfectly fine backups and special teams players, but not an NFL starter, especially at a position where you hear how important it is, whether it's Micah Hyde talking or Bobby Babich or Eric Washington or Sean McDermott, about how important it is for them to run the defense and be the leader of the defense and communicate and make sure that everyone's lined up and make the right calls so that the rest of the defense can be right. Seems like it's important, right? Really important, especially Sean McDermott. This guy goes from Luke Kuechly to Tremaine Edmonds to what does he have? You know, I mean, it's very, very peculiar to me. And I understand, like, all right, you had your limits with what you wanted to pay the position, and 18 was just not where you were comfortable with for Tremaine Edmonds, but you don't have an answer. And so I can understand letting him walk in free agency. Where I have a hard time is your replacement plan. Because you've been around Tyrell Dotson. You've had this guy around since 2019. You know what he's about. I mean, you drafted Terrell Bernard. I'd like to think that after a year being with him, that you had some level of understanding about what he's going to be in year two. And so for them to not be able to sign even like a Drew Tranquil type player, you know, I know Levante David went back to Tampa and maybe that was him wanting to stay where he's at, but you couldn't have like upped that offer a little bit. I feel like there was opportunities out there to bring in talent, and they were happy to roll with what they have. And right now, I think that's going to be a big miscalculation for this football team.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you. I'm of the same belief that they didn't. I'm not really concerned about losing Edmonds and the 18 million. I'm more concerned about what they did to replace him. I don't know if Balen Spector, like what is he? I mean, he looked good on the third day of camp when he got the opportunity, but that was the only really opportunity we got from him. I know Jordan Poyer spoke after practice.
Well, they told you what they thought about it. They gave him one day to be the linebacker and never again. Right? Yeah. What does that say?
Yeah. So, and it was weird too, because I thought Poyer and Hyde were I know they speak highly of their teammates, but like, they were like, he really commanded the huddle well and stuff like that. So it's kind of a anomaly. I don't know what they're going to do there. I don't think Dodson's a starting caliber middle linebacker. I don't know for sure because I've never actually seen it, but I'm pretty positive he's not. I don't believe that AJ Klein, I mean, does he have any juice left in the tank? I don't know. I don't think he's good, quite frankly. I didn't have him making the initial 53-man roster. I thought he was going to be cut. And then, I mean, Balen Spector, and then you have Terrell Bernard, who's kind of the weak side linebacker from Baylor in the third round that they drafted to be the backup to Milano. But like, what's actually the plan there? And now he has the hamstring issue, which hopefully he can overcome that and maybe try and get some practice reps in before the season starts. But just the whole idea of that middle linebacker room, it is concerning. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
It's rough. It's a rough situation. You're thankful that Matt Milano exists. But I'd be calling Anthony Barr and Jermaine Carter and Rashaan Evans and Jayon Brown. I'd be calling up Baltimore and saying, hey, what do you think about this Patrick Queen guy? Like, there's things that I would have done a lot more, a lot sooner. But at this point, there's still things you can do. And if I'm Brandon Beane, I'd be thinking about that.
Last part of the show, Joe, thanks for coming on the show. It's been, I think, great dialogue, great conversation. Defensive line. Obviously, Von Miller still in the PUP, has not returned to practice. He looks to it's trending more towards me for a week 5, week 6 return, but maybe an outside chance of that week 1 return. We'll see. Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa. I mean, again, like when I watch AJ Epinesa during training camp, it's so much different for me than watching him in a game for some reason. Like, I just feel like AJ Epinesa is such a good practice player, and I've seen the flashes in camp. And then when it comes to the game, I'm looking at him like a couple of reps on Saturday, and I'm just, where did that go? I don't know if it's confidence or if it's just getting those reps in games or if he's just maybe a practice kind of guy. But just your thoughts on the defensive line. Are you confident in them if Von Miller misses 4 to 5 games to be able to get to like Rodgers consistently? I know the Jets have a subpar, big offensive line issue, just like the Bills do right now. I know they have a couple easier games against the Commanders and the Raiders, and then they finish with the Dolphins. So a couple good teams in there. Joe, what are your thoughts on the Bills defensive line? Can they win games without Von Miller and get to the quarterback?
I think so. I mean, obviously they're going to be at their best when Von Miller's in there, but I mean, between Rousseau and Leonard Floyd, I really like that mix. I mean, AJ Epinesa, like you mentioned, he's looked good in practice. I know that we haven't seen that quite to the same level in preseason games to this point, but I think Boogie's had the direction, the arrows pointing up. It's Shaq Lawson still around. I think you can probably make it work with those guys. And then, I mean, this defensive tackle situation feels like it's about as good as we've seen under Bean and McDermott to this point with Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver and Poona Ford and Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips, right? And even some of those next guys, whether it's Cortez Broughton or Kendall Vickers or Eli Anku, like there's some nice options there as well. So I think that they have the horses that they need. I'm expecting Von Miller. I think it's week 6. I think that's always been in my mind what makes the most sense. That week 5 maybe, but that's in London, and so you wonder if, like, okay, Sunday night home against the Giants, Evan Neal's their right tackle. He's been pretty bad so far to start his NFL career. Like, is that the right opportunity for him to come back? I think it is. But I think they can weather the storm for 4 or 5 games and get Von back in there. And, I think that should be enough time for Von to come back and be Von, right? I don't think that's my big question. You don't really want to put him back on the field if he's not ready to make the impact that you need him to. And I think if you give him till week 6, I feel good about where his knee's going to be at, and him to be able to step in there and be that closer that the team enjoyed for what was it, 11 games or something, and then no more. And we felt that difference with him in the lineup versus without him in the lineup.
Yeah, this is definitely the most confident I've been in the defensive line. I think the addition of Leonard Floyd will maybe potentially be one of the most important offseason additions down the stretch into the late, December, early January games for the Bills. I like the interior depth. I think Tim Settle has actually played pretty decent throughout camp in the first couple preseason games. You mentioned Poona Ford, Boogie Basham. Those guys are all suitable, serviceable guys for me. I hope they're upgrades from like the Quentin Jeffersons and Vernon Butlers of the world. I hope that's what they can be for this team. Joe, any last words, your thoughts? Plug what you got going on. I know you do great things for Bills Mafia in this community, so just share what you got going on and anything coming up.
Yeah, appreciate that, AJ. It's been fun talking with you here. I do a daily podcast on the Buffalo Bills, Locked On Bills. It's free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Been doing a lot of work for Bleacher Report lately. In fact, I have like 3 streams over the next week coming up for people to check out. So get the Bleacher Report app and find my name, and you can make sure that you're aware of all the streams that I start there. And so that's what I got going on. Also, another daily podcast, Locked On NFL Scouting, where we talk not just about the Bills, but the entire NFL. So if you're looking for some national perspective from me, that is available for you as well on a daily basis.
And there we have it. Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. Thanks for coming on. It's your host, AJ Sabalski, with another episode of AJ's Analysis. If you enjoyed the show, and if you're listening on audio, please subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a really fun show today. And I forgot that we'll do some positive. I want to say one more thing. Josh Allen looked great, so don't worry about him. He had a really good day on Saturday, despite the offensive line and whatnot. I think he played very good. So thank you for everyone for listening. This has been the greatest turnout for a live show. I appreciate the comments, the live interactions. It's been a really fun show. And I will see you guys next week, Monday, where we will talk about the Bills versus Bears preseason matchup. Did anyone else separate themselves in position battles and much more? So we will see you next time.